Hi everyone, William here. It's a lovely Sunday afternoon, the 28th of September 2025, and this is the Grand Duke Dmitri 1915 diary entry, series. In fact, this is the last video for 1915, and then we'll be moving on. And it couldn't it couldn't be soon enough for me. These particular diary entries are very frustrating, and they're very labor intensive, shall we say, because my inclination is want to look everything up, and there's so many people, so many places, so many military units, and yet they're not telling us very much about Dmitri or about his impressions. We mainly just know what he's doing, where he's going, who the people are, but not how he is responding to things. We don't get that very often. So yeah, we're finishing up, hopefully. I have the 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th of November. I'm going to try to just power through them. And then, yeah, as I say, who knows where we'll be going next. But it will either be forwards or backwards. Well, that goes without saying, but either to 1915, because the 1916 diary was destroyed, I believe, by Dmitri himself, or we can go back and do a couple of letters that he wrote to his sister from 1908, 1909, 1910. Well, I don't have to tell you the years in order. So I'm not sure yet. It's going to kind of come down to what is at hand, because I have been intermittently taking my microfilm reels. I have these diaries on 38 millimeter microfilm, and I take them to the local public library and use their microfilm reader to scan them onto USB drives. And so I have all of them in hard copy printed out, but the question is, disorganized as I am, where are the hard copies of the 1917 diaries? And so if I can't find those tonight, then I'll fall back on some of the letters until I get a chance to go to the library and digitize those. Anyway, let's dive in. We're up to the 9th/22nd November 1915. I've been pretty lax with these. It's just sort of like the bottom has fallen out, and I just am shrugging my shoulders and saying, okay, I'm not going to look anything up. Well, I did a little bit, but we're on a flight path here at my house. But let's go forward anyway. 9th November, between Rennie and Balta, Vasilkin, morning Rennie, deputation, cathedral, inspection of Turkestan Rifle Brigade, lieutenant, inspection of expedition, inspection of expedition, decorations to sailors, snacks, inspection of battery, frightfully cold, lunch on the train, slept in the afternoon, tea, dinner, dominoes, attitude of supreme commander. So there are a couple things worth mentioning here. Vasilkin was an admiral, and I'm judging by the name Balta that this was a town on the Baltic Sea. I didn't look it up. Yeah, I don't know why Dmitri mentioned him in particular. Now, lieutenant, he says, just the single word, full stop, lieutenant. And I wonder, it's just a guess, but I wonder if that was his very terse way of saying that he'd gotten a promotion. Because, believe it or not, he started out when he first went to war with his regiment in August 1914, he was a cornet, which is the lowest possible officer's rank in the cavalry. It's equivalent to an ensign in the infantry or the other branches of the service. And so he may be slipping this in very quickly, that he'd been promoted to lieutenant. When he was banished from Russia in 1916, he would be a captain. So, that would make some sense if he was in 1914 a cornet, in 1915 a lieutenant, and then in 1916 was promoted to captain. Rapid promotions, but it was during a war. So I'm just not sure about that. I'm sure one can find it out, but I haven't done that. All right. So then the other thing worth noting, I think, is attitude of Supreme Commander. What does that mean? The Supreme Commander, of course, was Nicholas. So I don't know. He's used that expression once before with a woman. I can't remember which woman, attitude of so-and-so. Maybe it was Brasova. This time he's saying attitude of Supreme Commander. And yeah, who knows? Okay, we go on to the 10th/23rd of November between Balta and Kherson. These are, well, Kherson at least is in Ukraine. They'd have to be fairly far north if Balta was actually on the Baltic. Trying to remember my geography. Mainly they're in Ukraine and Belarus. Anyway, here we go. Between Balta and Kherson. On duty, reached Balta at 10 o'clock. Inspection of Caucasian Cavalry Division. Their appearance was stunning. A packet with orders. Horse compound. Beautiful place. Cold, freezing. Departure to the train. Farewells. Lunch. Telyakovsky. No idea who Telyakovsky is. Okay, yeah, so he's very impressed by the appearance of the Caucasian Cavalry Division. Their appearance is stunning or striking. You could translate it either way, and I assume he means that in a good way. It's interesting because one of the things that Paul Elinsky told me, Dmitri's son, in one of our conversations, was that Paul, had gone into the Marine Corps because Dmitri had, thought they had the greatest uniforms. So, like most of the Romanovs, he was really interested in uniforms and the sort of minutiae, the glamour of military life, and he's impressed, apparently, by the Caucasian Cavalry Corps. But the main thing that's important in this diary entry is, again, just a terse sentence, a packet, not even a sentence, a fragment, a packet with orders, full stop. So I haven't gone and looked up what I recall from Grand Duchess Maria's memoirs, Education of a Princess, and she alludes to something about Dmitri getting in trouble at headquarters and being sent home because he tried to tamper with orders or dispatches that he thought was Nicholas was getting wrong. Well, I doubt it's this particular occasion, but he is, at this time, the adjutant on duty. There were plenty of adjutants around, but they took turns being the one who was most on duty, who was right there beside the Tsar and doing the sort of almost secretarial work. And so apparently he received this packet with orders. What he did with it, we don't know. But he found it, worthwhile to mention it in his diaries, although he would have been doing things like that all along. He went on duty as the duty adjutant on the 7th. It's now the 10th. So anyway, that's just an aside. Here we go with the 11th/24th of November, which is actually quite a long one. En route to Mogilev, arrived Kherson 9 o'clock, deputation, entry into the city, beautiful flags, excursion to inspect the Caucasian Corps, 2nd Finnish Rifle Division, artillery, ideal. Then to the cathedral, the place where Potemkin is interred, in another cathedral, lunch on the train, Nikolaev at 2 o'clock, Sherbachev, Boris, inspection of the 4th Finnish Division, artillery and Cossack regiments in poor condition, much worse inspection, visit to the cathedral, general impressions of Nikolaev. So that is a long one, and it has a little bit more to say than usual. So when they arrived in Kherson, which is an important city, they were, not because of Dmitri, but because of the emperor, they were received by a deputation, and there was maybe almost a kind of parade. They have a grand entry into the city. There are flags waving, and Dmitri notes that it was beautiful. So he probably enjoyed that, things hadn't been particularly beautiful at the front, I think. Okay, so then they go in two cathedrals while they're there, and one, as he notes, is the place where Grigory Potemkin is interred. Grigory Alexandrovich Potemkin, he was a lover and favorite of Catherine the Great, and yeah, he was... Just making a note here. Apparently, I didn't know. Interred in a cathedral in Ukraine. Okay, so Dmitri is interested enough in that to note it. The other cathedral is Sviato-Uspensky Собор, and it's the main cathedral in the city. So Nicholas and his entourage visit both cathedrals, and Boris is there. And, if you think I should be more critical of what Dmitri was doing during the war, then I can tell you Boris was so much the worse. I mean, he wasn't doing a damn thing. He had a sort of nominal position as an ataman of some Cossack unit, but it was very nominal. He wasn't seeing any combat like Dmitri had. And going to Petrograd every chance he got, which Dmitri was, wanted to do that too, but throwing these grand parties, which Dmitri wasn't doing. Dmitri did not give host parties for whatever reason at his palace. He preferred to spend his time at the club and going to other people's parties and sort of more low-key. So, if you look at Dmitri by comparison to some other members of the imperial family, he comes off not too bad. Anyway, he mentions in passing that he's seen Sherbachev and Boris. Sherbachev I know we've had before in these diary entries, but I can't remember who he was. Tant pis, I didn't bother to go back and look for him. Okay, this is interesting that he notes that the artillery and Cossack units that they're seeing here are in very poor condition, and this is a much worse inspection in the town of Nikolaev than what they've had before. And in fact, the opposite last time, he noticed in the inspections on the 9th, he notices or remarks that the artillery is actually ideal, looking really good. But in this instance, yeah, these guys are much the worse for wear, which would have made an impression on him. He put it in his diary, so yes. And then he writes general impressions of Nikolaev, so which makes me wonder if he meant to go back and fill these diary entries in later. What makes the most sense is that that's his intention, and this is why he's making these statements. A packet of orders. He wants that to remind him. So, because there's something significant about it that he wants to write about later, or attitude of supreme commander. Again, that's to trigger his memory when he goes back to fill in the diary entries, which unfortunately either he didn't do that, which is not surprising. You do things like writing notes with the best of intentions and then never go back to them. But anyway, if he did do it, they don't exist. But at least we have an idea of what he himself was considering important enough to make a note of. Okay, so our final diary entry is short. 12th/25th November, Mogilev, Imperial train, all day in the carriage. Read, boring to be back, conversations about leaving. So this is interesting. I would have thought that, that he didn't like. I'm projecting, because I would have hated doing all that traveling, even in luxury. But he prefers, I guess, to be on the road. Sounds like they were simply in the train all day. And so he spent all day in the imperial carriage, and he did some reading. It doesn't mention dominoes on that particular day. And then no sooner do they get back to Mogilev than the headquarters, then they're already talking about leaving. And, all of this can be tracked through Nicholas's own letters and diary entries. So, if there are any mysteries that you want to solve that have to do, or charting the places that they've been, then you can get more information from other sources. But now I'm happy to say that's it for 1915, and that leaves us with this gap between the end of November 1915 and around November 1916, which is when the Rasputin conspiracy really formed. And Nicholas in November 1916 noted how depressed Dmitri was, and Nicholas was worried about him. But nonetheless, there was this gap, and I think this was probably the more serious part of Dmitri's war activities, because he had seen how bad things were at the front. He knew exactly how horrible things were going with the government, just as bad, if not worse, than how things were going on the front. And that all sped him toward the Rasputin assassination, and you all know the outcome of that. Banishment from Russia in advance of the revolution. I often laugh about that, thinking, he may have been the last political exile from Imperial Russia. Anyway, yeah, so that's a big gap, but come back tomorrow and it will be a surprise to you and to me where we end up going. All right, see you then. Bye.